think multifamily as an investment period, as an investment vehicle, that's going to be the number one vehicle for a really long time. It's the most easily understandable for anybody from single family to segue into. There'll always be commercial players and things like that as well, but I think that's where it's headed. So, you want my honest opinion? I'm in San Diego, and it's not because I'm biased. I did this on purpose, but I believe San Diego is going to be the next Miami in the next 10 years. I really do.
Welcome to the Jennifer J. Hammond Podcast. Jennifer is a licensed realtor, educator, speaker, and best-selling author. Jennifer's goal is to help you find your yay in every day.
We are here talking about multifamily today. It is Saturday morning. I'm super excited because we love to make sure that we are, there you go, on YouTube Live. Make sure we can not echo. We are also streaming to Clubhouse if you have a Clubhouse and you want to get in there. But if you want to see us on video, we are here and we are going to talk about multifamily real estate investing. And so much has happened now. We're in September 2021. I mean, with the COVID-19, things have changed so much. So Victor Bell is my guest today. I'm super excited because he has lots of experience, but he also has an amazing passion to help others understand and become educated and be successful. Sometimes I go back to my brother and I recently were talking about first-time home buyers, and I'm so passionate. I still teach first-time home buyer classes because I'm so passionate about getting the basics in before we get to the advanced anything. And a lot of times people, when they bought their house, their very first house, they made a lot of mistakes, but because they didn't sell it for a while, they didn't even realize the mistakes they made. And so when they go to duplicate, it doesn't work. Or if they get into real estate investing, they have a lot of bad information. So,
right.
Victor, tell us a little bit about your story and how you got into multifamily investing.
Okay. Sure. So I actually got into real estate in general, which my first segue into real estate involved multifamily, was after I got out of the military and got in trouble, got out of college because I failed out of the first semester. I wasn't showing up.
Oops.
I was young. So, I got a book from the store, and that first year I did 24 properties. Wow. So that was how. So it was, I kind of stumbled into it through, going to work, and everybody didn't really like the job. I got out of the military and I couldn't go do that. College, didn't do that. So it was like I had burned a lot of bridges. So, but I knew that what I was, any job, no one wanted to be there. So, I got a book from the store. I actually sat on the floor and, read it, before I went to work. And I was like, okay, I think I can do this. And eventually I bought the book, went to work, and literally sat down with the book and the phone that was in the back, because we didn't have cell phones. I didn't have a cell phone. And just called straight from the newspaper and read the script in that book. And that's how I did my first deals. So,
it's amazing because everybody kind of starts in a different place. And like for me, I educated a lot of self-education, and partly because I couldn't find a mentor. I couldn't find anyone who was willing to teach me. And partly there was a lot of prejudice against women getting into real estate investing in Washington, D.C. And I found it was tough to get people to give me an honest answer and not just pat me on the head and be like, oh, you can just be a licensed real estate agent. You can do other things in real estate, not real estate investing, which of course is where the money is. And so it's very frustrating. And I've learned that sometimes you do have to take responsibility for your own education and understanding. So it's important. So you started with a book, but go ahead, tell us about your first deal. How did that go?
It was, it was exactly what you said. So it was like what I did on my first deals, I didn't know that everyone didn't go through the same thing. So there was I remember specifically on that first deal when I actually called, I got a group of guys that had, a family that had a lot of property. I called out of the phone book and got to somebody who can actually help me. His name was Bob. And Bob told me what to ask after I got a yes on the first deal. And then those guys gave me the rest of those properties. So there was specific during escrow. There was a decimal in the wrong place. And the deal total was like, I think it was like $1 million, 1.2 or something. They were getting like, I don't know, it was like 800, from the closing, and the rest was a second mortgage, blah, blah, blah. But the decimal was in the wrong place. And I remember specifically, these guys got up and walked out. They were like, hey, you're trying to screw us over. And they got up and left. And I was just sitting there like, because I didn't know, like looking at the statements and what was what. I was brand new. I was just excited it was happening. And I had to massage this deal back together. And it was, these are some, normal guys from Texas. So, but they were really smart. So I had to kind of corral them back in and then sit down and look and say, okay, what's wrong? And catch those things. So that was really that's kind of, I'm a stickler for that. I may not catch every detail, but I'm meticulous for the main details of any deal. Of like, okay, what are the numbers right? Is this in the right place? Because that was my thing. So that's the most memorable piece I can remember about my first deal, was how important it was to make sure that everything is in order. Maybe not for me all the time, but definitely for the other party. Because I can fix what's wrong on my side, but I need to take care of, what's going on the other side first, or I don't even have a deal. So that was huge. That was a big thing for me on my first one.
I think it's really important because I know that sometimes I was the same way. I remember the first few deals, I was just like, I felt like a deer in headlights on like, okay, there's so many details. How do I know all the details? And how do I know if this is all right? And I think that part of it is just take one thing you don't understand, ask questions until you fully understand it. And if you don't understand it, ask again and keep on asking until you are fully confident in that and that you can apply it. If you don't, and that's why I say sometimes I just go back to the basics and go, hey, let's go for the basics, because that's where you find that there was something you didn't understand fully, or you had the wrong understanding or the wrong definition for something. And it's so important that you really understand it. So what about your first like multifamily? How did you decide to get into multifamily?
Well, it turns out that package of properties that I got from those guys, they were, the property I called about in the newspaper was a single family house, but the rest of the properties were duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. There was a sixplex in there, eightplex, a little mixed use building that they owned. It was a lot of stuff. So I actually got thrust into the business not knowing. So, and be honest with you, I think what the tipping point for me was the worst property in there was the single family house. So that was the big kicker. I was like, wait a minute. So all these other properties that are in there, they all needed something, there was stuff going on with each one of them. But the one that had the most amount of problems that required, the most amount of attention from me was the single family. Yeah. So that was the first, for one, I was the aha. And two, when the things, when it came time for me to get rid of something, I was like, get rid of that house. So the other ones I had for a while, me and a partner. So
let's talk about that concept though, because I think it's a really important concept is to realize that with multifamily, like for instance, if you have just even a fourplex, if one person isn't paying their rent in the fourplex, then 25% of your income is being affected. Whereas if you have a single family home and one person isn't paying the rent, that's 100% of your income on that property is not. And of course that multiplies, whether you have 100 renters in a building of 100 or whatever. So it's really important to understand that multifamily has a huge advantage over just a single family home. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, very. I talk about it all the time. It's kind of a exciting topic for me. Well, because right off the bat, like I was still doing like single family and, but a different way with multifamily. And I was telling someone the other day, it's like I made more off of just one multifamily deal combined than I did over like 5 years of doing like the side projects of homes. And I was like, that's massive, because when I think about that, it stops, at least at different people's levels. I understand everybody's at a different level. It stops making sense to do anything other than that, especially when you're looking at, okay, well, I want cash flow. I want a little bit more stability. I want to be able to sleep at night. Like you said, like if I have more tenants paying me, it's like having a store, right? You want more qualified customers walking into that store every day or every month than you would to just have the one and rely on that. So it's the same thing with the multifamily for us. We're like, okay, and especially as I got better quality stuff along the way, I got better quality tenants along the way. So what I didn't know in the last deal that was a plus now became the minus in the next deal, because I was like, whoa, I won't do that again, because I'm starting to get better and I'm starting to learn what I didn't know. And the better quality of asset that I got, the better the finance it got. The easier it got, the more people would pay attention to me, and the better referrals that I got. So it was like this huge climb into the multifamily thing once I really understood the concept of how it really worked. Because I self-managed initially, and then once I self-managed, I got 2 different managers. I found out which managers managed what specific type of property, whether, and I don't know who's listening, but whether they manage B properties better than, or I'm sorry, C properties better than B properties because they were C property managers. That was a big lesson for me. Like, the management company, that's the one guy that, is in an office that goes and collects rent, or have your tenants come and collect, drop off rent at the office, that can't go collect rent in an area where maybe the property isn't in the greatest area because he's worried. I didn't know that there was a difference between those type of people, because in my mind, a manager is a manager.
Yeah.
So, it was a big lesson for me once you get the properties, how important the management side is. And it's a team effort as opposed to before. I got this big, a lot of properties, and it was Team Victor. So that by itself was my introduction to saying, okay, this product is better. It's easier to get. I have better tenants, and then I have longevity. And I think that's probably why I actually survived this long, because I've been through all, I think 3 different market cycles, and I think this is probably 4.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I want to talk about COVID-19 and how it's impacting, and even what your predictions for the future is. But before, let's go into something that you brought up, and I think it's so important. I want to dig a little bit deeper into this. And that is, I love when you said you're Team Victor. So it was just, me, myself, and I when I started. And one of the things that I realized very quickly was, I used to call it building your A team. And I think that's probably because I love that the show A-Team, the fact that you have to build a team of people. Now I call it your yay team. And it's cool, because every single person on there should help you say yay, as well as they should be saying yay. And what I mean by that is, number one, I think it's important that you have a team of people, like your accountant, your attorney, whoever the contractors are that are going to help you, because again, when I first started, I used to try to do everything. I do all the renovations and the painting. And I mean, it's amazing. I can lay tile. I have lots and lots of skills, and maybe I'm good at them. Maybe, obviously, someone who it's their profession, it's much better for them to do it. But I've learned you should have professionals in every aspect of that. But one thing you just talked about with the management company that is so important and so often overlooked is that, like, not all contractors are the same. Not every plumber is the same. Not every manager is the same. And so let's dive into this a little bit. In how do you find the right team, because people, when they interview or when they talk to you versus what they actually do, can be so different, right?
Yes. Yeah. That's a great question. I interview people the same way. And I think it's because I've, the different things that I've done in life. I'm pretty great at listening to people, and I'm very fast, believe it or not. And we've talked about this, about, the speed of things, or just the way, I act, or how I move, or something. So I can usually,
and I'm going to interrupt you just for a second. I think that that's also part of your success, because I'm also somebody who moves really fast, and even my hands. And I mean, I don't like to be still, and I'm not like that way. I make decisions fast. I go with a lot of just speed with everything. And I believe that is a secret to success, especially in real estate, because there are deals, you can lose a deal so fast if you don't understand and you don't move fast. So I just want to say, like, I'm going to pull out the pearls of wisdom as we're going along. So back to how do you decide who's on your yay team?
That's how I decide speed. If they're slow, it won't work. Because it isn't that they're going to frustrate me. It's I'm going to frustrate them, and I know it.
Yeah.
So like if I'm dealing with people and they're slow, if I'm walking across a site and I look back and they're 20 paces behind, still kind of gathering information in their heads, I'm like, this person's not going to work because I'm going to call, ask for something. They're going to dilly dally. I'm going to call and handle it myself. Then why am I paying you? So
Yes.
at some point, I just blaze through, whether it's contractors. I'm like, hey, if you can't, I have this thing, and anyone who knows me will say it. I was like, if you're good at what you do, you should be able to answer my phone call during dinner, hang up, and get back to business.
Yep.
So like, like I shouldn't have to guess if you're good. Now, if you're not good, and then I get that, and you're a person who likes to drag, but I don't have the patience. Some people do, and some people say that that's not a good thing, and I'm like, that's fine. I was like, but typically I have to make a decision concerning a lot of people. So I've already thought through it. So I don't need to debate on that yes or no. So that's how I hire management people, construction people, attorneys, accountants, partners, everybody. If someone can't make a decision quickly, because I've already made it, right? Even if I'm wrong, I'll make that decision because I know I can always come back and undo a wrong decision if it hasn't done any damage. And if so, I'll look for somebody else because, again, I'm already in momentum. So that question is great. And I don't think anybody's really asked me how I do that because everyone kind of knows the same thing at that level. Everyone's a professional.
Right.
But if you're a slow professional, it makes a difference of whether we're going to do business or anybody that's somewhat successful because you're typically going to deal with a person like me, unless they're, super analytical. They come from a different background. So their assessment of their business and or real estate is done on a more meticulous basis. It's best for those people to work with someone also within the line of the scope of work they're looking for like that, because, so I said, I'm probably going to make them more upset than anything if they're slow. So I already know I'm starting off as a bad partner from that perspective. So that's actually worked for me. Every time I went against that, it's backfired every time.
Yeah.
I hate to say
Well,
it.
I think I think that's a huge insight I think that the speed of how somebody talks to you, how somebody, again, like you said about walking, I walk really fast. And when I turn around and I'm like, uh-oh, and they're way behind me, 20 paces behind me, then I know, oh, we're going to have problems. And so I agree with you. I think that that's so, so important. The other part about that I think is interesting is also, you talked about this, about picking up the phone, is also not only the speed of how someone communicates, but also the way someone prefers to communicate. Because, whether it's, I still hold my licenses as a real estate agent in Virginia, DC, and Maryland, but it's hilarious because I realize with clients, one of the first things I need to do is ask them, and I've had to do this with my real estate investing as well, ask them, how do you prefer to be communicated with? Text message, phone calls, or emails, or in person?
Mm-hmm.
Because I realized that I can really upset somebody by text messaging them, and they do not like text messages. And I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have other people who are like, please don't call me. I don't ever check my voicemail. And it's just annoying when I see that you've left a message and I'm like, oh, got it. Right. Okay. Everybody's different on how they want to be communicated with. And if you want somebody to be moving fast, you need to find out what is their, like they say, what is your love language? What is your communication via? Is it text message? Is it email? Is it phone calls? Is it in person? And if we end up, and the reason that that's really important is you need to have a baseline of how you're going to communicate with somebody. One, hopefully fast, speed, but two, you also need to make sure that when something comes up, when there's a problem, how do you resolve that problem? Mm-hmm. Is it going to be able to be resolved over a text message, or do you need to meet face to face to get it resolved? And again, that's the speed, because you don't want to leave a problem, right?
Right. And I think it's so, and again, thanks for sharing that, because that definitely, and I think you hit the nail on the head too, because there's different ways to communicate inside of different communication lines. And when I say communication lines, business wise. Yeah. As a realtor specifically, not that you are, this is just from my perspective, because I'm not a realtor. My wife's actually a realtor, but because I see that as a service business. So when you're servicing a customer and or a client, then there's this mutual respect of how do we communicate so I can service you, at the highest level of possible based on your recommendations. So I know typically when I'm dealing with, whether it's a management company, a tenant, or anything like that, because I do have, I have had tenants, I'm dealing with the tenant issue now. Especially in the beginning, I blaze through all forms of communication, calls, emails, texts. And because I started off, 20 years ago, everything was a phone call. As a matter of fact, the most masterful thing you could do was call someone, because then there's no miscommunication.
Right.
So now what I do is, well, I actually learned this through closing deals. I was like, you can't, from the phone perspective, you can't hang up on me when I'm standing there.
Right.
So, so like I will immediately call an office, email an office, text an office, send a video through text and a voicemail and an audio video through text, and then show up to an office. So at some point I'm like, I will get attention because, one, speed, two, I understand people are busy. And I also understand that typically if they're on or they're in the system of real estate, one way, shape, or form, no matter what category they're in, I'm probably not priority. So if I don't make myself priority, I won't be.
Right.
Out of sight, out of mind. So and I know that's not, perfect that's not, ideal for being like a realtor or, on the mortgage side of lending, dealing with customers and clients. But typically I'm more of the, in the acquisition seat, right? Or, capital, or I'm the speaker or something like that, in some environments. So I want to make myself readily available. And really it's an external thing to show, hey, I can be everywhere if you need me. And then based on what you said, typically how people respond or what they respond to, that's the next communication line that I focus on first and later. So if I did all that stuff, all 10 pieces, right? If they respond through email, I'll respond through email first. And then I'll backtrack from there and go, okay, now I'm going to leave a message. Now I'll call. Now I'll send a text message to let them know. But I'm going to go to the line they chose first to have direct communication. That's actually helped. Or if I call, they'll be like, hey, I got your email. I apologize. I was busy. So I'm thinking, okay, they saw the email first. I'll start there next time. And if I don't hear from them in like 2 minutes, I'll go to the next thing. So while that's not helpful for other people, because they don't want, I like when people do that with me. I'm like, hey, this person's serious. They need to get my attention. And because that, they'll rise to the top of my, my attention, and I'll put focus there. So I think I've learned the communication thing in reverse, where it's reach out to people and get their attention, because and I just assume everyone's busy, even if they're not, even if they're avoiding me. I'm like, oh, I just thought they were busy, because I assume everyone's nice until they're not, right?
Right.
So,
exactly. I do the same thing. I remember when I first moved, I grew up in Key West, which is a little island off of Florida. And it's so funny because I got to Washington, D.C. and I would be like, hi, hello. And I'd say hi to everybody. It didn't matter if they were the parking attendants, or it didn't matter. I just said hi to everybody. And I can't tell you how many times people would say, so you're not from around here, are you? And I was like, well, why wouldn't everybody want to say hi to me? Because I say hi to them. Why not say hi? It's not like we're having a full conversation. I just want to say hi. It reminds me sometimes that I've seen, well, I won't go into that. Anyway, I don't want to get too sidetracked. Anyway, I think it's important that we realize that communication, I always think the best of people until they prove themselves otherwise, which, speaking of them proving themselves otherwise, what are some of the things that you do to help? So when you get a building, when you acquire a building, of course, one of the first things with a multifamily building is that you want to increase the value. So there's all sorts of ways that you can do that. And so part of it is deciding, so are you going to make a new common room? Are you going to have a basketball court? What other things would you do to make this place great for the tenants? So that, one, obviously you have happy tenants, but two, so they actually pay you. And three, what are the things that you do? Well, I want to talk about, what do you do when they don't pay you? Like, what are the ways that you either work with them, or how many chances do you give them? But also, how do you increase the value of a property when you're first looking at it? And then, of course, once you've acquired it.
Right. So, typically for me, I like exterior stuff. So I like redoing the parking lots, painting the buildings, planting, palm trees, adding more lighting so the place is brighter and it looks more inviting. Yeah. So that's first, always. Last few properties we had, we would put up like nicer doors on the outside, things like that. So anything you can see from the exterior, from the street, really, That's vital, because right away, especially with the parking lots, we pull everything out, parking lots first. That allows me to have a better, introduction to myself moving in and taking over from a new owner perspective, and then having the management introduce us, and then also start taking a look at, any 30-day leases, things like that, that we can go in and say, hey, let's have a conversation with the tenants, and let's, introduce ourselves. We're new. And I say this, it's funny. Like I heard it from, another, mentor I had in the beginning. It was like, every tenant's afraid of their rent getting raised, so don't let them down. I know that's not funny, but I thought,
Yeah.
never enough to make them move out. But you figure once you get in there and you start, either pressure washing the building, painting the building, and then, stripping the parking lot, you start showing them like, hey, we're going to take care of this place. If the last person didn't do it, not in a bad way. I mean, if you've owned a property for a while, you probably did it and it's been worn down. You let people know that you're coming in to make things better, and they typically want to pay, or they typically don't stay. It's kind of what I always say. They either pay or they don't stay. Like, not in a bad way. That's a good thing, because sometimes it's better for people to not stay, because what they need, I'm probably not going to provide. So even if they were to stay, pay a little bit more, and it wasn't meeting their needs based on who they are as tenants and who I am coming in to make sure that we raise the value of the asset, it's probably not going to be a good fit, no matter what I try to do for them, right? Because there'll always be something. So then I do that. We do the first door knock. I have a couple of different ways that we do it, especially on some of the smaller stuff, right? And when I say small, I mean like 10 units, 12 units, like 20 units or so. That 10 to 20 units, that's about there. In those instances, typically there's a relationship going on still with the tenants. They're not, that, far disconnected from either a manager that's overseeing the properties, and or if somebody's self-managing, or you're giving away one unit to a leasing person who's kind of, I call it, it's like, the aunt that's taking care of, or the uncle that's taking care of and overseeing the actual, so the kids don't fight.
Exactly.
So that's that. And then typically it's knocking on the doors, and that's what we usually do. Walk around with the management company and say, hey, we're going to come in, renovate. We're going to be renovating all the units. The leases this is the new price point on all the leases next year. So you can lock in this price now, starts in, we can do that, make the adjustment, in the next 60 days. And by the way, for that, you get to pick between these two pallets of flooring, and we'll redo your living room we'll move stuff back. We'll do it. We'll be in and out for one day. And they say, yeah, sure, we'll do that. We'll just make the adjustment on the rent, because then we'll let them know, like, hey, when your lease is up in 6 months or 8 months, this will be the new rent. So we start collecting what we can now.
That's a good strategy. I like that strategy.
Yeah. So it's simple. So right away, exteriors first, make it nice, put in some trees, because, trees always make it nice. I like everything to kind of look a little bit more like something like a beach, because we lived in Hawaii for the last 17 years. So once I got a good format for that. And I'll tell you why after. Well, I can blend it in. So I found if I do the same thing over and over again for every property that the lender has already said yes to, like the local bank comes in, they do financing, right? All our stuff. If they know what my branded model is on all of our properties, then they will say yes to the next one, because the more stuff they see that's consistent with me, the less stuff they need to go and check back up on after it's, on the next deal. They say, and you just say it in your story, like, hey, it's the same way I did the last one, same paint scheme, same trees, same contractors. They become a lot more confident, because that's all it really is. So to realize the value, it's one thing to create value, it's another thing to realize it, get it realized by others.
Well, and acknowledge by the bank that this is definitely something that's going to increase value. Again, it just gives them a level of comfort. And as you said earlier, it's speed. It makes everything go faster.
Yeah. They're like, wow, he just closed.
And this is his formula. He's going to do A, B, C. And we know the contractors are good ones. We don't have to worry about that. You're minimizing all of the risks that the bank is going to be worried about, which is I also want to say a secret to your success is learning, what is it that they are concerned about? And then you find out their needs and wants for the bank. And then of course you're like, hey, and the needs and wants of an apartment building, whether it's a small one or a big one. Okay, we're going to start with the exterior. Because I think you're absolutely, that's a huge secret in the fact that if you walk up to a place and the exterior isn't taken care of, you kind of, I mean, even you think about it, even if you're in a town you've never been in and you're going to go to a restaurant and you're like, why is that the outside looks horrible? You're kind of like, so I wonder whether the kitchen looks horrible. I wonder if this food is going to be okay. So I think it's really important that your exteriors look really good. So those are really important.
Yeah, I don't want to be pleasantly surprised by walking in and be like, wow, it's beautiful in here. The outside wouldn't let you know that. Like, I like to reverse, like I said, my wife says all the time, she's like, man, she's like, you're a stickler for that. I was like, I am. Like, I'm a views guy and an exterior person. Like, as soon as I see that, I know whether I want it or like it or not. Or I know what could be there. And again, to your point, any lender, usually what I used to do, I don't have to do it anymore, but it was always get a property, get an artist rendering, for like $40 from some art, from somebody who's going to take a look. And I'm like, hey, take a look at this picture and then add trees here, brighten up the colors, do the parking lot. And that's what I presented with, talking to a lender. So my job was, anytime they said, okay, and we're moving forward with that and went to committee, got financing, I rushed out of my mind to make that picture look exactly like what they were going to see when they pulled up. So that always gave them confidence in me for the future, in anything else, because it goes right back to speed, right? I don't have to guess where to be quick anymore, because I've already kind of committed myself to the cause at that point, right? Because I've showed the picture, and I learned that too. I waited a week, after like a second time I did something, and then I got a call from the bank. And they were like, hey, when are the trees going in? And I was like, oh, the Bobcats are going to be busting up concrete and planting grass coming up this week. But I have put it off by a day or two instead of pressing. And I was like, man, they're expecting me to be who I've always been. And that was a big lesson for me. Like, a lot of investors out there think no one's watching. But just because no one calls.